Hi, my name is T12, and I'm a 34-year-old incomplete paraplegic who's since become a right above knee amputee, and whose condition or injury, my onset started on the 28th of August of 2010 in a failed suicide attempt when I took the expressway off the side of a cliff and wasn't really concerned about the strategy of landing or gravity. Of course, it was only in the heat of that drunken, very depressed, confused moment, being chased by several different police officers after I took off from a gas station on my go-kart, and I just had a feeling tonight wasn't going to be a take-it-home buddy night. I just had a feeling that they were going to fuck with me. And, I'm well aware that I shouldn't have been doing that thing. Shouldn't have been out drinking, shouldn't have been driving any kind of a vehicle, regardless of the justification you try to use for that behavior. It was unacceptable, and in a panic, having been to both jail and prison previously, I know what that environment's like, and some people do well in those environments, and some people, they just don't. And I was one of those people who just didn't do well in that type of environment, and learned that that environment just wasn't for me. Not that by changing my behavior, I didn't need to worry about being placed into that environment. So I found myself on this chase, through yards, alleys, you name it. Any way I could go, I was going. And because this little go-kart was so tiny, I was really actually making some distance, initially, but because I was so drunk and so panic-stricken about getting away and just avoiding death, basically, that's the way I saw it, that just any sense of logical reasoning was gone. It was totally gone. And then the go-kart broke on me, and I ended up having to ditch it, and I started running like hell. My feet just wouldn't stop moving. There was no stopping that momentum. It's like the most motivation you've ever had at any point in your life, accelerated to the max. That adrenaline just kept moving me. And I kept hearing all these sirens all over the place of the police that were chasing me, trying to find me. And this was in South Minneapolis. Well, this was actually in St. Paul. Because I had gone to a Super America for a pack of cigarettes and a couple of sandwiches. This was after much protest from both of my roommates at the time to, just take it to bed. You're really fucked up. You shouldn't leave. And I wasn't hearing any of it because, at 26 years old, you got the life figured out. There's nobody who can tell you anything because you have all the life's answers. And there's just nothing anybody can do to tell you no. And anybody who's doing that is just trying to be against you. Of course, in a drunk, illogical state of mind, you can make anything make sense. How we can do that sober in a state of panic. So, imagine the drunken stupor I must have been in that night. On top of the horrible depression that I lived with and being very suicidal on top of that. So basically at this point in time in my life, I was literally living day to day like it was my last day. Because that's basically what I was looking for it to be. Just the right opportunity to present itself so that I could get out of here and be done with this thing that I thought was so terrible called life. Because I had it so bad, and I was so depressed, and nobody understood me, and, on and on and on. And my woes were so much worse than everybody else's woes on earth. Poor me. And I just found myself running, and running and running. And I was very disorientated because I wasn't real familiar with the area. I had been, during the day and sober, things seemed a lot more, like, oh, I recognize this landmark, I recognize this tree or whatever, but, in the heat of the moment when you're going like hell, everything just turns into this giant blur, and that's exactly what it was. So, I find myself running down a hill towards East River Parkway. East River Parkway runs along the Mississippi River, for anybody who's not familiar. There's the St. Paul side, and then there's the Minneapolis side. The river separates the two cities. I lived in Minneapolis just literally 2 or 3 blocks, 3 blocks across that river. So it was like literally, I was almost home. I mean, I could almost see the house if it hadn't been for the trees. I was looking at the Lake Street Bridge and thinking, if I can just make it to that bridge and get up that staircase and hop over this, scoot at my ass across this bridge into Minneapolis, I can dart back home. And I'll grab my buddy's car in my drunken state. Yeah, just what I needed to be doing, driving a car. But, like I said, when you're not logical, you're very illogical, generally, totally. So in my brain, I had convinced myself this is what I was going to do. The only problem with that plan is it didn't include a St. Paul or Minneapolis police officer. Well, it wasn't even a St. Paul. It was a park cop that wasn't part of the posse who was chasing me, trying to locate me, and hold me accountable for running from the law on this go-kart. It was a park cop who just happened to be trying to do their job, making sure that there was no things going on the parkway, and that things were secure or whatever. Whatever it is that they do during a given day when they're doing their job, that's what they were doing. But because I was so paranoid, and because of all the other shit going on, automatically you see a cop car of any kind, at that moment, they're part of the thing that's fucking coming to kill you, So I just panicked. And I really had nowhere to go. I was running out of room. I knew it was only just a matter of seconds before this guy, took his strobe light that he was using to basically right then and there, like, oh, here we are, freeze. And I made that split-second decision. Like, there wasn't any thought, really. There wasn't. It was just my legs were already propelling me at such a fast speed because I'd come down this ginormous hill onto the parkway. So that momentum was going. I mean, it was just like the cartoons where the Woody Woodpecker, flies off the cliff, and he's just hanging there for a second, and then he kind of looks around like, damn, what just happened? And then it's not until that moment of that free fall that you're like, oh no, this is not what I wanted. But it's too late at that point. You've made that decision, or that decision was made for you in that haste, of lack of processing. So I went over this cliff, and I fell at least 40 feet, and I landed in a tree, and I shattered my spine. And shattering my spine was only the beginning of this nightmare. If only that had been the end of it. It wasn't anything. That was just day one. I don't know what day we're on now. I quit counting. Thousands of days. And I found myself upside down in this tree, knowing I was going to pass out, tangled up in the branches. And even in the drunk state, I knew I got to get out of here. This is bad. I had enough logic to at least process that information. But before I landed, there was that SOS call to God. I know it doesn't take long to fall 40 feet, but let me tell you all the things you can accomplish in your brain when you think this is it. I didn't know what I was going to be landed in or on. I didn't think any of that. But what I did think was, this is not what I wanted. When I finally got to making that decision that was life-altering, even before I crashed to the ground or into the tree, there was that realization, now this was not the way it was supposed to go, man. This was not your end today. But I wanted to live, was basically the last thing, and that plead with God to, but God, this isn't what I wanted. And crashing into the tree, the realization that things are bad, feeling like there's 2,500 nails and spikes, and you're in a pulverizer, and you're just in an amount of pain that's unmanageable, undescribable, inhumane, terribly hellish. You're so confused because you don't understand exactly what's going on. Honestly, I didn't know that I had broken my spine, shattered it completely at T12. What I thought was that I had gotten like compound fractures in both of my legs, and like bones were sticking out. And I was really confused as to why I didn't see blood just gushing everywhere with that amount of pain. It didn't make sense. Well, of course it didn't, because I'd never been in this situation before, and being so drunk, you just aren't processing things logically. But I knew that I had to get out of that tree. And in doing that, I knew that was going to further exacerbate my symptoms and my problems. But not to do so might just be the end of it entirely, so there wouldn't be any reason or justification to really care. If I'd passed out in that tree and let go, I think I very well would have rolled down that cliff right into that river, and this would be not something I'm sitting here telling you today. That river would have killed me, So I did that thing. I pulled my pants down, basically to try getting out of my jeans, to try untangling myself. Fell another 10 or 15 feet, landed on my ankles, landed on my feet, and broke my ankles, and then started barrel rolling down the side of the cliff. And I was headed right for that river, man. I was headed. There was nothing that was stopping me. And anything that was in my way was just snapping. Anything I thought might I slam into, and maybe it was stopping me or slow me down, nothing was stopping it. And that water just kept getting faster and faster and closer. And I'm just clawing at anything. My fingers are totally bloody. My nails are ripping off. I'm just clawing at anything to try to stop me from going into the river. And, as this is happening, I'm pleading with God. Because this is what everybody tends to do in those moments, when you finally get there. You're just like, oh God, this is terrible. This is horrible. Yeah, it is. But there was a certain determination too in all of that, and there was a certain acknowledgement that, for as depressed as I thought I was, now that I had a real reason to be depressed and really give up and just go into the drink, I didn't want to do that. I didn't. And I think that bitter resolve in me must have resonated with the man upstairs, because I managed to slam into the world's skinniest little tiny twig, sticking between two sheer rocks. And I jammed into that thing expecting it to just snap like everything else had. It wasn't even as thick as a pencil, but it was one of those like greenish type, newbies that doesn't snap. It'll bend a little bit, but those things don't tend to break real easy. That is the thing that saved my life. That little tiny twig. Because if it hadn't been for that, there was nothing else. That was the last thing in my way before I barreled into that river. So for hours and hours and hours, I screamed in agony for help. I used every available ounce of strength through the confusion and the chaos and the passing out and the pain, in and out of consciousness. Listened to the drunks on the river calling back, thinking it was a real good time. I did not think it was a real good time. All I wanted to do was just wake up from the nightmare. But there was already a certain realization that it wasn't a nightmare, it was real life. And it was my own personal nightmare forever. You know? So I held on to that little twig, and I held on to it, and I just prayed, and I just begged, and I pleaded, and I asked God to help me. I asked Him to help me when I couldn't help myself. And I believe He did that. I believe He did that. You know, because logic just dictates that that little twig should have just... I'd hidden way more substantial shit than that, and it didn't hold. So, you know, everything that happens for a reason happens for a reason. Whether we like it or we don't. You know, there's a greater force at work that none of us actually can see or know about. And it was definitely in full effect on that morning of August 29th or 28th. And for 6 or 7 hours, I screamed and I pleaded and I begged. And I was cold, I didn't have a shirt, it was the end of August, so it was really damp, and, you know, I actually had walking pneumonia that I didn't know I had before the spinal cord injury. So I had been sick for a long time. You know, I was almost dead from the pneumonia. So it's kind of like the spinal cord injury. Honestly, it might have saved my life. I do believe it saved my life. I'm still here to talk to you. You know, and I don't know that this would be the case if I wasn't sitting right here talking to you with the way that the chain of events went. About 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, I heard somebody up there on the top of the parkway, and I couldn't see it. I didn't know who it might be. Probably just another passerby with their headphones on that wasn't going to hear me. And I had gotten so hoarse, my throat was just raw. I mean, totally raw. Almost, I mean, it was like bleeding from all the screaming and trying to get anybody's attention, yelling and crying, begging and pleading. And I don't know, I was out of gas, man. I was out of gas, exhausted. I was still drunk, but I wasn't drunk enough to the point anymore where I really didn't understand a lot of what was going on. Things were starting to click. Or it's like, you're in a really bad way, Mr. Cleats. And the situation is very dire. You know, I didn't have a cell phone with me. I didn't have a phone back then. I didn't have no money. I didn't even work. You know, I was just pretty much a deadbeat, biding my time. You know, so there wasn't a whole lot more I could do other than just pray that somebody up there would hear me. Somehow I would get somebody's attention, and somebody would be able to find me and help me before I died. You know, before that twig finally broke and I rode into the river, before the pneumonia just finally got me, before something happened. I will say it must have been the longest 8 hours of my life. And I've had some long-ass days. But there was a certain resolve in all that that just became undeniable. And the resolve was that you're going to do this thing that you need to do. And you're just going to keep moving forward. And that's been what I've tried to do ever since that day. Only when you don't know exactly what it is you need to do to move forward, a lot of times you end up moving way back. You know, there's no manual that I know of for the spinal cord injury. You know, the go-to manual that says, well, you know, when you're in this amount of pain, just cut your leg off and, well, that amount of pain might go away. You've tried everything else up to this point that was available to you just about, or that you knew you had access to given your, you know, wonderful health care insurance and the broken system in which you're using. You know, so there's only so far you can go with so many things when you're trying to improve your situation, especially when you can't any longer get out of your own way and you're constantly in your own way physically. You know, my injury has been very frustrating in the fact that I used to be very active I used to be a real big runner. I used to bike constantly on bikes. And there's a lot of things that I used to do. I used to move, you know, but that desire to move has never gone away. You know, it's been that driving force for so long. That level of independence that you've lost, you know, it becomes an insatiable appetite for you to get that back. And you don't care what it costs to get back the thing that you call normal life. Any trial, any error, any adversity, any remedy that might offer you some relief that you don't have now, I'm going to guess anybody who's in my situation has felt the same way. You know, oftentimes knowing that getting yourself into that situation is maybe a band-aid, it's terrible, it's going to put you in a worse way later on. You know, it's like you get into this like plead mode with yourself where it's like, well, I'll give up a leg if it, you know, means seeing it to the goal, you know, or I guess I'll give this spinal cord stimulator implant a try and see if maybe we can get to a reasonable level of pain management. Or I'll take this methadone, even though I know it's going to take everything from me and leave me broken. Of course, you don't know some of these things until it's literally too late and you're stuck in the situation. And now you've got to find the exit, an alternative, something, you know. So in my struggle for independence, I've lost almost all of my independence in that sense, you know. Just being hopelessly obsessed with being back on two legs and walking upright without any devices. Because to be anything less than that means you're not a man, or you're not human, or you're just not going to measure up. Or, you know, the erectile dysfunction that goes with it, you know, the bladder disorder, the problems with bowel movements, just everything that associates itself to my particular spinal cord injury is something I just want to be divorced from. That reality, you want to be divorced from it, you know. And at the very least, you want to break. You want to be able to get away from it, you know. Sometimes when I used to get really, really frustrated and pent up, I would just run. I would just run and run and run, physically run, until I was so exhausted I couldn't breathe and I just literally would collapse on the ground, you know. And sometimes people just need to do that. They need to go. You know, they need to be able to have an outlet that gives them a sense of independence or self. You know, something that they can identify as their unique thing that gives them perspective, pleasure, or release. You know, things that are healthy, that are not hurting other people or ourselves. Because we've all know about, you know, habits and things that like that just are not healthy. You know, we all have some of those. I'm guessing. I know I do. And, you know, so wanting this level of independence, you know, it's starting with me getting MRSA and C. diff and ifs and lifts and every kind of thing seemingly you could contract, you know, doing the spinal cord surgery after log rolling on a bed for 2 weeks or more. And just the most agonizing pain, busted up. Them not being able to do my spinal cord surgery initially because of the pneumonia, and me basically just about flatlining the first time they tried to do the procedure because my body was just too compromised to support putting me under anesthesia and that excessive load that was going to put on my body. It couldn't take that. So first they had to cure the pneumonia, which was nothing short of horrific, and placing me into a coma basically to do that. You know, people coming and going, vague recollections of voices and parts of conversations that all seem like just part of the continuum nightmare. You know, physical therapies, doctors, pain that you just can't imagine. And screaming when people would just walk through the doorway and they were 30 feet away from me, just in the anticipation that they might. That's a level of intensity I cannot really describe for anybody who has not been through it. You can try, but you're going to fail miserably. And the sad thing is that you're trying to tell doctors these things that need to make big life-changing decisions for you on your behalf. About pain, and about prosthetic devices, about amputations, about corrective surgeries, about, all of these things that are so life-changing at such a dramatic time when you just have no go-to for any of it. There's no right or wrong answer, except everything you do is the wrong answer. Every time I try to make a move to improve the situation, it would cause 3 other things to go bad. Well, let's get you on a prosthetic. Well, I made the mistake of having general surgery do my amputation. That was terrible. General surgery should be the last people on earth who do an amputation, unless you're in the middle of a crisis situation and there's just no other surgeon to do the job. And don't expect that outcome to be favorable, people. Don't, because it's not going to be. When you need an oil change, you don't bring your car to an optometrist. You bring it to a mechanic and say you need your oil changed. Same deal. There's a right person to do the right job. But if you don't know who that person is, you don't know you've made a fucking terrible mistake until that limb is now gone. And you're saying, well, the surgery got botched, but, you signed on the dotted line, so there's nothing legally you can do, because you agreed to being more maimed, in the pursuit of trying to help yourself out of the misery that you're in. You literally just found yourself in a whole new level of it. So they botched the surgery from the beginning on my right below-knee amputation, which basically was a direct result. The amputation was a direct result of the MRSA over the last 2 years, and them having to cut chunks of bone out of my foot, and I chopped parts of toes and cut them off and screw them back on. And, literally, I was turning into Frankenstein, the freak show, in this insatiable desire to just be upright. I was losing everything that was going to make me do that. Whittling away body parts to avoid pain and suffering, but going through 10 times that amount of pain and suffering. And, doing the below-knee amputation without understanding that, hey, buddy, guess what? Not only did we botch your knee, not only did we botch your below-knee amputation, but your knee is shot, and you need a knee replacement. I wanted to amputate my knee. I wanted to amputate my leg as soon as I got paralyzed, because I knew in my brain it wasn't coming back. And it was just going to be a burden that I was just going to have to deal with, for no real reason, if it could be eliminated. That's not an easy decision to make. It's one thing when you're in a car accident, they knock you out, you wake up, your arm's gone. Well, what happened there? Well, in the heat of the moment, we had to make a decision. We had to amputate your leg. This wasn't that situation. There was months and months and months, 2 years worth of trying to figure it out and understand who the right person was, But again, I was trying to do all this shit on my own, for the most part. I'm not saying I didn't have help and support from people who love and care about me deeply, but those people were not themselves in my situation. So it was very hard for them to understand some of the decisions I was making that didn't seem like they were in my best interest. I didn't understand that a lot of these decisions weren't in my best interest. I just didn't. You think, well, let's eliminate the problem and move on to prosthesis. Only to find out that the surgery got botched. I continued to have skin breakdown below the knee. So it was like every time we finally would get into prosthesis and start therapy to try to get back onto freaking life, we would be breaking down. Then the knee failed so miserably that I couldn't do it. And I wanted to amputate it. I told him immediately. I said, let's just amputate the fucking knee. I said, chances are good that something goes bad later and we do that thing anyway. So rather than putting me through 3 surgeries, we're looking at 2. You know, nobody wants to do an amputation once. Nobody wants to do an amputation twice. And 3 surgeries, when you could have been through just 2, I don't know anybody on the planet who wants to sign up for that either. You know, a knee replacement is agonizing. Anybody who's had one understands. It is excruciatingly painful. You know, whether or not your situation is where you're up like a cricket the next day walking on it, or you're not. A knee replacement is a fucking knee replacement. It hurts. It's not a fun procedure. But to go through that level of pain after you already went through a horrible, I mean, it was just, my original surgery just went terrible. I mean, it was just a worst case scenario. It really was. General surgery doing it, you know, my lack of blood flow and stuff into that limb, you know, the healing process being terribly slow, you know, me arguing with doctors and techs, you know, when they wanted to start pulling sutures and staples and shit out of my out of my below knee amputation, and me telling them, look, only half of this shit is healed, people, so when you pull this other half apart, it's going to split open. And that's exactly what happened to me. So what did that do? Well, that just increased the healing time, the complications from infections, in and out the hospital for all kinds of shit related to that first amputation. It taking, I just don't even remember. I feel like it took years for that fucking thing to heal. It really did. You know, and then as it's healing and I'm still in the brace and all that, you know, losing my balance on the front stairs of where I was living and going down 5 or 7 concrete stairs and landing directly on the bottom of that stump. And I tore all the muscle that they had attached to the bottom of the bone off, and I was screwed from that point. You know, like at that point there needed to be a surgery done to correct it, because things got ripped and torn and they were in really bad repair. That didn't happen. I let it go, and I just continued to live like that. You know, so literally it got to be to the point where, you know, that bone was literally trying to poke itself through my skin, and it was very excruciating. And there wasn't a whole lot they could do about it, because they had cut the limb so damn short that the doctor who looked at it after surgery was like, well, I hope this works out for you, because if it doesn't, it's going to get iffy. Excuse me? I mean, you had the whole leg. Why did you need to cut it so short? You know, it's not like I was awake for the procedure and I said, oh, let's just cut it right here. You know, I had a general understanding that my limb was going to be longer than it was, you know. And I never really did get an answer to that, other than the wrong people did the fucking job. You know, that's what happened. I sent my amputation to an optometrist, and the optometrist was like, well, I guess this will have to do. And that's what I got. So all I got after that was nothing but problem after problem after problem. Then the knee failing completely. Me arguing with therapists and doctors and prosthetists about the need to keep the knee. Basically, the assumption was, if you get rid of your knee, you'll never make it. And it's going to be so much harder for you to do all of this shit. You're just never going to be able to do it. You know? Which was just a bunch of bullshit, because there's lots of people who don't have knees, who are on prosthetics, who do just fine. Not saying that was going to be my case. It wasn't. But, you know, the fact that they basically sold me the fact that this knee needed to stay around put me through an extra 2 years of pain. An extra 2 years of pain. Agony, misery, skin breakdown. We did the knee replacement, and that only solved part of the problem. Sure, maybe my knees got more functionality now, but what doesn't? What's below it? Because that was shot. So we continued to have nothing but problems with skin breakdown and trying different prosthetic devices. You know, meanwhile, life continues to go on, you know, and instead of getting closer to your goal, you're now getting further and further and further away from it. You know, it's like you're drifting out to sea when you're on this hopeless, like, paddling routine, and, you know, the more you paddle, the more frantic it gets, and the more frantic it gets, well, the least the less you are towards where you want to go. That was my case entirely, to the T, you know. And, you know, the doctor who did my knee replacement was so proud of himself because, oh, you know, we never do a knee replacement on an amputated limb. That doesn't happen. They just amputate the limb further. Well, there's a reason that is sort of the understanding, because generally what ends up happening is, like in my case, you go through an amputation, then you go through a knee replacement, then you go through another amputation when they figure out the knee replacement really didn't solve any of your problems. You know, it really didn't. It was just a whole nother level of excruciation that I feel like I never needed to be a part of. I mean, yay, great, I got to be a member of the Zipper Club, just like everybody else who's done it for a while, you know. But it didn't get me any closer to the goal. It got me further away from it. And like that is when I really started to get to the point where it's like, man, you start to question what you're doing. And then if you're questioning what you're doing, you have to start questioning what everybody else is doing for you. Well, what's this doctor's real intention here? What has he got going on here? You know, you just start to develop a mistrust, a lack of logical understanding for things, because nothing makes sense anymore. You know, and all you want is mobility. The thing that's been missing, mobility, independence, you know, being able to further live your life out the way in which you would like to live it. You know, I don't think that's being unfair or unrealistic. You know, it's just a desire. It's just something everybody wants. I mean, I hope, you know, something I wanted, my independence back, you know, because I felt like until I got that back, I just wasn't going to be okay. And, you know, looking back on all these years of everything that's happened, wow, just wow. I mean, talk about writing a novel, you know, and it's not over. I'm 34 years old, you know, I'm still facing right carpal tunnel surgery for a hand that's got advanced carpal tunnel. The left one I just did on the 14th of November, you know, the outcome of that hasn't been real favorable, and hopefully with therapy and time this hand does continue to improve. But, you know, then I got my left shoulder, it's shot, there's a lot of nerve damage. Hopefully they can do something for it. I'm hoping it doesn't have to turn into a total, like, shoulder replacement, God. But if it does, at this point, it's beyond my control, you know, and all of that is due to using crutches for 6 years solid through my hands, you know, because I'm paralyzed and I don't have the lower abilities that I used to. You know, I would put the crutches up underneath my arms and lean into them so that I could, like, have two hands to do something. Oh yeah, hands free today. Yeah, well, let me tell you about that tomorrow, and 5 years from now. You're paying for it dearly. You know, I mean, I got all I can do to stand with a pair of crutches under my arm for more than 20 seconds. And I'm crawling and I'm just miserable and I can't take it and I want to break my shoulder off and throw it away. But I can't because it's attached to me. You know, and then going on with walkers, and it's the same scenario. You're putting all that pressure through your hands, up into your arms. It's going into your shoulders. All of the same scenario. Then you get into the power chair, you know, and or the manual wheelchair, and then you're using, you know, the grip string to grip the rims to propel you forward, and that wears you out. Your body's just not designed to do that again and again and again like a car. You know, automated processes are automated for a reason, so we don't have to do them. You know, because when we do them repetitively, we tend to get hurt. You know, whether it's carpal tunnel, whether it's a back injury, or whether it's some other related thing to overstress. You know, and I sort of seen all this shit coming years and years and years ago. You know, I tried to do as much as I thought I could do at the time with what I knew how to do, and it just wasn't enough. You know, often days I would just lay in bed just saying, well, screw this, I can't do this today, I'm just going to lay here, you know, and just sort of give up. you know. So there would be days that I would just lay in bed, unable to go on with this plan, this grand plan of getting back to life, because it had just worn me down so terribly bad that I couldn't do it, or at least I'd convinced myself I was no longer able to do it. You know, so I would get, you know, to a certain point where I literally just couldn't go anymore. You know, we would run into all these hurdles. A lot of them were beyond my control. They were. What was in my control was how I dealt with them. And I didn't choose to deal with a lot of them very appropriately. Certainly not very productively. You know, and that is certainly on me. And I own that totally. You know. And I think anybody else in my situation sort of kind of understands the desire that keeps going to find that new answer that's just not there yet. You know, I mean, it's like that people never lose hope of things being different, even when you've been told time and time again, Mr. Cleats, they're not going to get any better. Matter of fact, it's gotten a lot worse since the last time we saw you, and, you know, it's time to really start thinking about alternative means. I knew this. I've known this for the last 8 years. I never should have been in a manual chair, really. But that fight for independence and that minimization of symptom and an attempt to be as normal as possible and as proud as possible and get up there and show the world you can do it just one more day, you know, in that pursuit has lost so many other ones, you know. And I just got to the point where this shit got obsessive. It did. I'm a bit of an obsessive personality at times. You know, I obsess about things that I want to get done when I really want them, you know. And this was one of those things. And because it was so major, I think anybody else kind of in the situation understands. Sorry. After 40 minutes of trying to sit in one place with no butt and this can sticking out of my back, it's excruciating. Oh. Good God. That just wore me the fuck out. See, when things like that wear you out, you're going to have a long day. A really long day. You know, it's good that I've learned to kind of be a little bit humorous about some of this. Because that sense of humor and that dedication to seeing it through to something that's not have kept me going, along with the people who have been there indefinitely for this process. It hasn't been easy, and it's far from over. I mean, this nightmare is just, I don't know, it's one of these ongoing things that doesn't end. The scene just changes, you know. Today it's a leg, tomorrow it's MRSA, the next day it's a surgery for this, the following day it's a bladder infection. It's just, there's always going to be something that's ongoing, and it's called life. After a spinal cord injury or any other horrific, disabling injury or condition, you know, whether you chose to put the gun to your head or somebody pulled the trigger for you, it really doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all human beings, you know, and I think we all deserve a second chance, you know, especially when we get to a point in our life where we really want that for ourselves, you know. I've fought so hard to get to the little shitty pedestals that I've ever stood on that most people will never be able to appreciate it, you know, and that's fine. It's not for them to appreciate, really. It's for me. It wasn't theirs, it was mine, you know. It's hard enough being paralyzed from the waist down and losing that mobility and just having just barely enough of that mobility left over to tease the hell out of you, to give you more hope than you really should have, you know, to say, well, you know, you're so young, you got nothing but time to figure this out. Yeah, well, in the meantime, what's happening to your life? It's disappearing while you're trying to get that thing back, you know. So I just had to get to a point recently, and it really was after this last surgery that I had on my left hand, where I went from being big bad guy who can do anything and be there for everybody no matter what, I'll dive off that cliff right now, let's go. To the realization that, look, man, I just can't keep doing this. I can't. I'm actually killing myself, trying not to kill myself. While I'm actually trying to kill myself still. That was the other thing. That until recently I hadn't been real upfront about. Although people around me have been seeing it since my dad died in January of this year. Basically starving myself to death. And thinking, well, let's just get this over with, I mean, that depression has never gone away, even though the desire to go on still stays. It gets overwhelmed oftentimes by just the reality of the situation you're facing. I believe they call that situational depression, as opposed to an actual chemical imbalance in your brain. Not saying that doesn't exist on a level 2. However, when you're in a situation that you find yourself not wanting to be in, it can be depressing. I think anybody can agree to this. And I'm no exception to that rule at all. So, that depression, that situational depression, is just, it's constant, and it's varying based on what you're dealing with. Some days are alright, some days are really bad, where you're just like, man, this gets much worse. I might just have to phone that friend and make sure I'm not alone tonight, because I don't know how that might go. And that's a sad reality to be in. Certainly when you don't want to be there, and you just want to get back to a place that's healthy, that's manageable, that you can live your life as full as possible, as independently as possible, So, losing my independence after this surgery was the thing that really set some things in stone. Where it's like, look, man, you might only be 34 in age, but you are too old for this shit anymore. Really too old for this shit. Fighting, great. I'm never going to stop fighting. To stay as healthy as I can. And to be as independent, while being smart about a situation as I can. I've made so many risks. I've taken so many risks that didn't pan out, that didn't work, that ended up being the disease and not the cure. Listening to people who had all these answers, who knew best, except no, they really didn't. That part of it never stops for people. But I think you get more refined the further you go along with your condition or whatever. And there is a bit of a reality that sets in where it's like, there are certain limitations. I really do believe just about anything can be done. If you have the right people, resources, and determination behind you. I really do. The brain is an incredible tool, the most incredible tool there is, in my opinion. Super powerful. Like the most ultra efficient computer that there is. But the brain is also the thing that gets in people's way, whether it's for good or not, And in my case, I had to realize that, look, we're disabled to the point now where we can't propel ourselves with any of the devices that we've been using, So over this last basically 2.5 years, I've watched the decline on my own TV at home. While everybody else is out there trying to live life and, encourage me to get out there and do things. And I'm just like, well, I'd like to, but, that's just too much. So there's so much of your life that you spent trying to get back just to have the realization that a lot of that was for nothing. Or maybe not nothing, but chalk it up to life experience. Say, yeah, I guess I went through that too. Oh boy. Pat on the back for that one today. Yeah. So, after the surgery, we realized that we're going to have to get into a power chair, and that there's no way to alleviate where this is heading. I'm no longer able to perform any functions of a job standing. I can't do it. because of my disability and because of all of the secondary conditions that have resulted from the primary spinal cord injury, I'm unable to sit for long periods of time without readjusting. As you can see, I'm starting to get really fidgety, and I'm very uncomfortable sitting here just trying to finish this, because it's excruciating, you know. But realizing that, okay, so we can't work, but we need a job. So how do we do that? Well, you're going to need a power chair. Okay, well, the justification for the power chair is clearly here. I mean, it's been here since really day one. You know, if people would actually try to put in some effort for me, like the doctors and the therapists, you know, but they were too convinced that they had all the right answers back then, you know. I just imagine what life might be like now if I had decided, you know, why don't we pursue the chair 5 or 6 years ago, you know, keep my body from deconditioning any further, maintain what I have. I mean, my life would probably be spades what it is today, and going with that level of understanding and that outcome. But I didn't, you know. I drove myself into the ground trying to get out. And then when that car crashed for good, I realized, man, we got a situation now, you know. Then after that surgery, that was the icing on the cake, where I went from the proud guy who pretends he can do everything for the world to the guy who just can't, and tried like hell, but failed miserably in every way. It was like 10 days of just straight failure. It was like fall on your face failure every day after surgery for me. It seemed like every day just got worse for a while, you know, over this last basically month. And, you know, trying to get that back on track, trying to figure things out, you know, knowing I need to go back to work. I really do, you know, and the only way that happens is if I have a power chair. And I live in Minnesota, you know, 6 months out of the year, it's cold, there's snow, there's ice, there's all kinds of treachery outside, you know. Been doing crutches for 6 years on ice and snow. I've spilled it so many times, you know, fallen on my face, fallen on my ass, you know, the worst, most embarrassing procedure or situation you can imagine. It's happened, you know, it's happened, you know, just totally unsafe, you know, getting to the point where the manual wheelchair, you can't grip the wheels, you know. I've got poor circulation in my hands, so when I get cold, which is instantly, the second I'm not in like 75-degree weather, I'm freezing cold, and I mean my hands are like starting to frostbite on me, you know. And once my hands get cold, I can't do anything with them. Same with my feet. My whole body basically does this shit since my spinal cord injury. So having that, you know, knowing now I need this chair with all these features, and we're working on that, and I'm really confident that insurance will help me, you know, get to an end result that's favorable for that, you know, with the right justification and people in place to do so. You know, the big problem now becomes a vehicle to move me past this place, you know. Because if I need to be in the power chair, which I do, to get to these places, I need to be able to get to these places. And I don't have a vehicle. So without a vehicle, without an accessible vehicle, which is specifically outfitted not just for a handicapped person, but for a handicapped person in my situation. Hand controls, you know, the tilt rock steer, the suicide knob, you know, no seat, where you can get a ramp, and you can roll right into the chair, or right into the van, with the, you know, with the chair, basically park right there at the steering wheel, not have to be doing a bunch of transferring and moving into an uncomfortable chair that's from the factory of the car, because it's not going to fit my ass, because my ass is one size fits none, this guy, you know. Things are so uncomfortable all the time. So, for me to get a job, I know I need my chair, which means I need to be able to get my chair to work, you know. And the only way that happens is if I have a vehicle that accepts the chair, you know. And that is not a small thing, you know. buying a van that's in decent shape, you know, I mean, let's face it, I mean, used, you know, a used nice van, $5,000 or more, you know, and like I said, that's not like next to new at all. I mean, you want a new van, fully loaded, $60,000. That's not even accessorized, really. I mean, that's with all the bells and fucking whistles on these things now that all these people have convinced themselves they can't live without, you know, until they find themselves needing the basics, like a vehicle to get to work, you know, and suddenly all those bells and whistles just seem real extravagant, you know. What I need is a bare, basic van. But what I don't need that's bare and basic is all the equipment that has to go into the van. And that's an expense on top of purchasing the van, you know. So really buying a $5,000 van and putting $40,000 worth of accessories into it, which is probably excessive in this case, it's a theory. I'm just throwing out an example. You know, it doesn't make sense to start putting chocolate into milk that you know is already soured, because it's just not going to taste very good, and the expectation is never going to be met, you know. And furthermore, getting people to justify paying for things gets much harder. The older the vehicle is, the higher the mileage is, you know, the less value it holds, the less likely somebody is to step above and beyond and say, look, this guy really needs some help. You know, he's on a fixed income, he doesn't work, he isn't able to work without the chair. So the only way for me to really get this job, honestly, is to get the vehicle. You know, people are like, well, what about Metro Mobility? And what about Metro Transit? You know, there's so many factors in my situation that make that just really not an option. You know, I've tried, believe me. You think that this wasn't like I just decided, well, I'm just going to go to this route right here. No, this really was a last resort. You know, the end of the road, sort of, to speak, you know, plea for help from the call of humanity, you know, because I can't help myself out of the situation that I'm in. I've tried. And the harder I try to dig myself out and figure it out, the deeper I end up getting involved in the wrong way, you know. I just want to wake up like everybody else, get in the chair, go to work, be as productive as I can given my situation, you know. And I know to do that, I need equipment like a van that's accessorized, you know. I mean, I'm looking at $15,000 for a van. That's my goal. If I could get $15,000 raised for this van, then I feel that that puts me at an advantage that allows me to start moving forward in a way that I've never been able to. Never. Never, ever, ever. Since the onset of my spinal cord injury. And trying to get that thing back. That just has never been right. You know. When you don't have legs, you can't just get up and go wherever you want to go. You know, there's procedures for these things now. You know. I mean, it's been years since I just flung out of bed. Because I realize I can't do that anymore. I'm going to fall on my face. You know. But there were some times where it's literally, when new to the spinal cord injury, where it's like, okay, let's get up for that day. Boom. Oh, shit. Literally fell right on my face getting out of bed. Because it's like, oh, yeah, remember you're paralyzed now? You can't just do it like everybody else assumes you can. You know. The other thing about relying on medical transportation is it's very unreliable, given the elements. What do I do? Call work every time I need to go to work, you know, getting a job, and say, well, you know, I'm real sorry, but the bus isn't going to come today because, well, they told me there's just a little bit too much snow, or they're a little bit too backed up on passengers, so they can't make my stop. So, sorry, I can't make it in today. That just doesn't work. You know, millions of people in this world have vehicles, and it's not a luxury item. It may appear to be a luxury item to somebody who doesn't know your situation and is looking at, you know, the little snow globe that you shake up, and you're like, oh, look at this scene, how cute, how luxurious, that item over there that you don't really need. Yeah, I do. I really do need a van. You know? I mean, if I were sitting here asking for $60,000 to buy the latest equipped greatest thing on earth. I think that would be excessive. I'm not doing that, you know. But at the same time, I realize that trying to come up with $5,000 doesn't get me there. And I don't have the ability to come up with the rest right now until I start working. You know, I don't have the credit history, I don't have the work history, I don't have the income to support a lot of the things that I need to do to move forward. So essentially, I need to work backwards so that I can start moving forwards. Well, luckily for me, that's not a new thing. You know, I'm so used to working backwards to even get one step forwards that people are just like, so what was gained there? And oftentimes I have to ask myself the same question, you know. But in this case, I need the van before I can do something different, before I can get to that next phase, you know. I need to be able to get to the thing to do it. You can't do something you can't get to. You just can't. And if you can only get there a partial amount of the time, or you're going to be late, or, you know, it's just not going to work in the way that you need it to, then having the thing at all just doesn't work for you. You know, every time I hear somebody tell me, well, yeah, a car would be nice, but you just don't need it. No, maybe you don't need a car. I really need a car, a van, so that I can move this forward in a way that enables me to get back on that horse of life and giddy up, you know. That's all I'm asking for is, you know, help from people that might be able to do it, knowing that I can't, you know, and that I will be thankful, and, you know, that I will take good care of it. You know, that's the other thing, you know. It's okay to have something, take care of it. Understand what it is you have. Well, you know, for somebody who's paralyzed like me, I do understand what a piece of equipment is in a way that a lot of people don't. Well, it's just a car. Well, it's just a wheelchair. Well, God, it's just a walker. No, it's just a mobility device that gives me an ability to do something I can't without it. And to somebody who doesn't get that, I'm sorry, you're probably just never going to get that. And from the deepest part of my heart to yours, I hope you never find yourself in a situation that puts you at odds with that assumption, because it's very odd, you know. I don't pretend to know people's situation anymore until I actually get to know them and talk to them and get to actually hear their side of it, you know. Because from one perspective, it just looks like it's totally over the top. And why would you need this, you know, when you've been managing just fine without it for the last 8 years? Well, I don't think anybody who knows me well would say I've been managing anything real well at all for any amount of time. It's been more of a survival mode than any kind of living life to any quality degree or any of that stuff. You know, it's just survival mode. You know, I guess it would be nice to step out of survival mode for a while and get into the mode of life, you know. And I have faith that that's going to happen. You know, I don't know when, and I don't exactly know how. You know, I don't know that I might end up raising the money that I need for this van. I just know that I have to try. I have to make an effort. You know, I have to call out to people who might be able to say, look, I hear this guy's situation. You know, it's terrible. He really does need a vehicle. It doesn't sound like a luxury item to me. You know, it's not just work either. It's medical appointments. I've got all kinds of medical conditions. So I have to get to appointments at the hospital. You know, well, guess what? You know how many appointments I've missed because transportation just isn't going to make it for me today? Well, sometimes you've got to be there. You know, you just got to get there. And sometimes when you've got to get there, there's just, you need to. You know, I mean, we don't question that a person with asthma needs their inhaler so they can breathe better. We just simply get them the inhaler. You know, it's just that simple when you remove the excessiveness of what it is. It's just an item that's needed to get down the road physically and metaphorically on this journey called life, you know. And what I'm asking for is to get my life back, as much of it back as I possibly can, you know, given my current situation, knowing that it's going to continue to deteriorate. I mean, I may very well get to a point someday where I'm not even able to stand at all. regardless of what device or any of that, and I fully expect that to be a possible outcome in my future, because I've pushed it so hard for so long, knowing better. I knew better. I knew better all the time, most of it anyway. You feel the level of pain in the bottom of your foot. It tells you, hey, something's not right. Well, yeah, what's not right is you got one leg and you continue to push it like you're just the Incredible Hulk. Nothing to see here, buddy. I got that door, 10,000 pounds. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. Good day, sir. So it's about getting to a point where I needed to ask for help, to drop my pride, to drop everything, and maybe feel like a bit of a charity case or a head case or whatever case you want to make it. The fact is, everybody on earth, we have needs. We just do. Sometimes we're able to meet our own needs, and that's great. It's called self-sufficiency to the max. And sometimes we just know that we need help, and we need to ask for things that we don't have. And until we can ask for them, in a way that appeals to somebody else, really, really understanding the situation and feeling for you, you're probably not going to get too far. I'm not upset at any of this. Some days I do get upset, but ultimately I put myself in this situation. So really, to ask anybody else or expect anybody else to just have the magic answer for me and I walk away and everything's fine really is totally misleading. And I don't take that presumption or assumption at all. I'm more than willing to do what I need to do to make sure that this can become a reality. I want to work again. My God, do I want to work again. Every day I sit in this apartment just listening to people bitch and moan and complain about the job that they have, how unhappy they are, how little money they make, how much of their day is wasted in transit, their coworkers don't like them, their boss is unfair to them, and then you have people like me who not only have a spinal cord injury, but have a criminal history which preceded it. So it's just like, okay, so if it's not the spinal cord injury that's going to kill me on this interview, and my disability portion of things, it's the criminal history from 10 and 15 years ago, which has so much white hair, they need to shave it. It has nothing to do with anything. But it's one of these things that's still being used against me. Somebody's like, well, get it expunged, move on from it. Well, the thing people are forgetting is all of these things, they cost money, and until the original charge from 15 years ago, the restitution part of it is satisfied, and all of those things are taken care of, which they haven't been, that's not a reality I can look at. That F stays on the report card and it goes to corporate. Corporate sends delete, and I get the Dear John letter. Dear John, not today, or tomorrow, or ever. But thank you, but no thank you. Yeah, doesn't matter if you can actually do the job or what your qualifications are as a human being or for the position. All they see is, well, there's too much risk involved with this. We don't want to have anything to do with it. Okay, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I could actually go out and buy the van that I'm trying to have raised. 15 grand worth of van money right there. Flash it around and go buy your van. All I need is for some people to just really help me out here, It's what I really need, For a long time I wanted that, and I couldn't ask for it. So I'm hoping now that I've reached this point where I've dropped the pride, I've, basically come clean with a whole lot of things that were going on to a lot of people in my life, and trying to get help to move on from that and really move in a positive forward direction. I'm hopeful that a number of people hear this, and we can hopefully figure this out. I have faith. I do have faith. That's something else I got. I got faith that this works out. I don't know how, and I don't put a whole lot of energy into that part of it, but I do put a whole lot of energy into having faith, in the process itself moving forward, with my life moving forward, and with the higher power being able to to help me out in ways that humanity hasn't been able to when that is the case. You know, I think we all are striving for something in life. Mine is independence and getting life back the way that I sort of knew it to be when there was a quote-unquote anything close to a norm. You know, I mean, simplicity literally jumped off that cliff that day. And after that day, the simple life, it really did walk away from me. You know, so this is part of trying to reform and simplify some things that have just been so complex, and I just need to get away from them. I just need simple, you know, and I think really at the end of the day, it's a very feasible request, you know, when it's made to the right people and to the right audience, you know. I mean, I'm a great guy, you know. I love people. I love to help people, you know. That's like what I try to do as much as I possibly can, when I can, you know. It really is. So, with that, I'm hoping that people understand a little bit more about my situation. They get to know me a little bit more, understand that my motivation is to move in a forward direction and really to stop going back, because it does get really old trying to move forward one step and taking 25 back, and you're just like, man, this is not adding up. So, my name's Ty Cleats, and this is my campaign. Thanks for watching, and I hope you're able to help. Have a great day.